Hello, and a very warm welcome to the Total Saints podcast. We are the weekly Saints podcast, your home for all things Southampton Football Club. This podcast is being live streamed on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Twitch. So a very good evening if you're watching along live. Our podcast is supported by our loyal Patreon community. Without you, we couldn't make this show each week. So thank you as always. Also, a huge thanks to Pitter Self-Drive for sponsoring this episode once again. They're offering TSP listeners 10% off rentals with the code TOTALSAINTS. That's all one word. You can use that code when booking online or quote the code when you're booking over the phone. They offer cars, vans, trucks, and minibus hire at very reasonable prices. They're flexible on short-term or long-term rental needs, and they operate a 24-hour drop-off service. So there's no need to stress about dropping off the vehicle in working hours. And if you need a van for a tip run or maybe to move some furniture, they now offer hourly van hire as well. Pitter Self-Drive is based in West End, making them the best solution for Southampton van hire at affordable prices. You can find out more or get in touch. Head to the website, which is pitterselfdrive.co.uk, or give them a call on 02380 474 443. Coming up this week on the podcast, it was the return of the Late Late Show at Watford, but we're still in the cup thanks to that Stu Armstrong equaliser. 1-1 the final score. We're going to look back at that game. And we return to league action at the weekend with a trip to Rotherham. Matt Lax from New York Talk, the Rotherham United podcast, is going to join us later to preview that one. My name's Martin Starke, and I'm joined this evening by Steve Grant, who is the owner of SaintsWeb. Glen Cour is the writer of the blog League 1-10, and Eleanor Hobby is a freelance football writer and Saints fan. All underpinned by our TSP patrons. This is episode 261 of the Total Saints podcast. Now, as always, we start out with a quick shout for our Patreon community, whose monthly contributions support the show. There are 4 tiers, ranging from £5 to £20 per month. And aside from supporting the podcast, each of those tiers has different perks. There's access to an ad-free version of the podcast each week. There's the TSP t-shirts and the merch bundles. There's the FPL, and you get access to some of the live events as well. If you'd like to get involved in supporting TSP each month, just head over to patreon.com/Total Saints podcast for more details. All the links can be found in the podcast show notes and the YouTube description. So Saints managed to snatch a replay from the jaws of defeat at Watford, 1-1 the final score. Steve, you were there today. How was the away end? How was the game?
Packed away end, always a bonus, these FA Cup games where you get a bigger allocation. Decent noise for the most part. The game itself was scrappy but open. Weirdly, it was a little bit like the game in the league where we had periods of the game where we just found a way to give the ball away, which was really frustrating. But I think that was probably to be expected with 9 changes to the starting lineup. I think the disappointing thing was that there were certain players who I think you were really hoping for a sort of breakout performance to kind of illustrate that they've got what it takes to be in the starting 11 for the league games that we're obviously taking much more seriously. And for the most part, none of them really showed up, unfortunately. Charlie Alcaraz was busy, but kept giving the ball away in simple areas. Sort of even before we got into their final third. Tyler Dibbling unfortunately just didn't get the ball, and there was part of it that kind of felt like there was a lack of movement up front, and it felt very much like those games at the start of the season, sort of around the end of August, beginning of September, where we just didn't have that cohesion, which I think you would expect with that many changes, but it just felt as if you kind of thought that after all this time that even the fringe players would be able to kind of drop into the lineup and know their duties. And I know there's a couple of players that are in there who haven't played an awful lot at all. But the ones that have played quite a bit, you would have thought that they would have stepped up a little bit. Jack Stevens was okay. Howard Bellis had such a weird game. He was either brilliant or awful. And there was kind of no sort of in between of him just doing what he does. it was his mistake right on half time that almost cost a second goal. And yet in the second half, there were 2 or 3 challenges that were sort of chance saving challenges. And his sort of balls over the top for players to run onto. So it was just a really disjointed performance until we made quadruple sub, bringing the big guns on, and that settled us down, and we basically just camped ourselves in Watford's last sort of 30, 40 yards or so for the remainder of the game. And I mean, the draw was at least kind of the least we deserved. But ultimately, it's also the result that
that we wanted the least.
That neither side wanted that. And you could tell by the way that we were piling it on in injury time that we were absolutely desperate to get a second one and not have this extra game. But unfortunately, if you leave yourself only 20 to 25 minutes to actually play in, then you do run the risk of not getting the result you're looking for, unfortunately.
But Eleanor, welcome back to TSP. Thank you for joining us tonight. Still in the cup, the unbeaten run continues. What did you make of the result, first of all? Because it was the game that none of us really wanted, and it ended up with the result that none of us really wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I only got to listen to it on the radio, so I was listening to Adam Blackmore. But I mean, I was kind of happy that we were still in the FA Cup, because I'm one of those, like, even though I'm only in my 20s, I'm one of those like nostalgic people who love the FA Cup. So obviously, like, getting promoted is more important. But I was happy when Stuart like scored a lovely goal, basically like edge of the area. So yeah, I don't think we needed another game. I don't think we needed the replay, but I'm hoping we'll manage to sort of beat them in the replay. But the first half did sound like quite lethargic, and just, I don't know if it was the midfield like being quite defensive and there being a lot of changes, but it didn't sound like, obviously the Swansea game had amazing, like some of the best football we played. It didn't sound like that. It sort of sounded like we gave the ball away a lot, and Watford seemed to be a bit more like they wanted to win the tie. And I think I was sort of like the second half, I heard there was like no changes at the break, and then I think when we did eventually make the changes, because obviously like both Armstrongs and Ryan Fraser, like it just injected a lot more pace into the game, and obviously Stuart made some great runs down the left hand side. So it was just brilliant when he sort of brought on like the better players, really.
It's a shame he had to, though, isn't it, Glenn? I mean, I had written down like 9 changes was always going to disrupt the rhythm, but you kind of think, surely we're at that point in the season now where it shouldn't really. You know, we should have players that can come in and they're so well drilled and want to do well that it doesn't disrupt the rhythm.
Yeah, but these players are reserve players for a reason, in the main. You know, and you could maybe, you know, in any sort of league game, you substitute on 2 or 3 of them, and the level doesn't drop because they're replacing tired players. But if you play 8 or 9 from the start, including some youngsters, and youngsters can sometimes be good and sometimes be bad, and that's just the nature of of being a young player playing only your second or third game. I mean, I thought Jaden Magoma was pretty decent at left back, so he had a good day. Tyler Diblin, as Steve said, didn't have such a great day. The players I was disappointed in were the experienced players who are not in the team who come in. You know, Mason Holgate in the first half was atrocious, and in the second half he was brilliant, and that sums his career up in a nutshell. You know, he's capable of being very, very good, and but you're more surprised when he is good, and you're less surprised when he's absolutely shocking. And he's had both. He seems to be 9 out of 10 or 1 out of 10, and there doesn't seem to be any in between with him. And that's, you know, it's another Ainsley Maitland-Niles, unfortunately.
Would you have subbed him at half time though? Because that was the on that first performance.
I think he was very lucky to come back out for the second half. But obviously Russell Martin had said at half time, that was awful. Go out and do better, which is sometimes an effective way of going about things. And that seemed to work with Holgate. There were some others that didn't work with. Joe Rothwell, I'm really struggling to see it. I know he's only been here a couple of weeks, but I'm struggling at the moment to see anything to make me think that transfer is going to be worthwhile, especially with Joe Aribo coming back into the mix. It was so much better when the midfield when Will Smallbone and Stuart Armstrong came on. It just the midfield went from nowhere. And I thought Shea Charles was decent, actually. I think he got taken off simply because, we needed a goal. And I thought the midfield improved massively with the substitutions, and then we managed to sort of pin Watford back a bit. And Ryan Fraser, Sam Ammo, Adam Armstrong, all the subs had an impact, which is a bit of a complete turnaround from last week against Swansea, where none of the subs had any sort of impact at all. But yeah, the players came in. Some will be pleased, some won't be. Alcaraz didn't, as Steve said, just gave the ball away lots and lots. He looked a bit more comfortable at the end when the breaks were off. We got 20 minutes to score a goal, and therefore there's no real defensive responsibility. We're either going to equalise or we're going to lose 2-0. And and with no one wanting a replay, I guess the pressure was off, and he could play with a bit of freedom. But he had a strange game, and there were just too many in that first half, who stunk the place out. You're not going to have a good team performance if you've got 5 or 6 players who are making basic mistakes. And we've not even talked about Joe Lumley trying to save the ball without his arms on the goal. I mean, not only is the non-wall absolutely ridiculous, but then to get beaten at the near post like that and not use your arms, it was a very, very strange goal.
He looked like a character from Spamalot. Is it the Knights when they've cut their arms off and just dive in without his arms? Was that your end, Steve? Were you?
Yeah.
Did you see that? Did you get a good view of that? Because I was watching.
Yeah, I was kind of directly behind the line of it, and it was just. It looked as if basically he he lost track of where his near post was.
I think he was going wide.
He thought it was going wide, and he's pulled his arms away, and he's just got it very badly wrong.
What about only one man in the wall as well? That must have been him.
Yeah.
Is that on him? He must have said,
I assume that's by design.
Right.
I mean, the wall was kind of lined up okay, I think, but with only one man there, you've got a very narrow kind of target to get past, and you've only got to get past it slightly, and you're then arrowing in at that near post, aren't you? It's I mean, he's hit it well, to be fair, but yeah, I mean, Lumley should be saving that comfortably, really.
And I just want to talk about the that depth in squad, Eleanor. I know you kind of touched on it, but does this, this was a real opportunity to prove that actually there is a bit of depth in the squad there, and we've got a bit of strength, and there are a lot of games coming up. Does it worry you a little bit when you see those changes made today and players coming in and not necessarily having the impact that he was hoping for?
I don't know, because I remember with some players it took them a while to kind of get to grips with Russell Martin's style of play. So I don't know, because I don't remember much mention of Joe Rothwell. So I don't know with him if it's just that maybe he'll get better. But I know with Tyler Dibling, there's a lot of promise there, and obviously they're still really young players and they just need more game time. But obviously Aribo coming back as well, that would be good. But I know with Jack Stevens, that's a nice bit of depth centre back wise, and then Holgate, I remember him at Everton, and yeah, he's just it's so hard to predict really how awful or how good he's going to be. Against West Brom, he was amazing, but he's not really played because we've not needed him. But I think James Bree as well, obviously Ryan Manning and Walker Peters, when they play, it's fine, but I do miss James Bree. That would be a good bit of depth as well. So I'm not sure really, because I think we've got quite a nice bit of depth in midfield, although Shea Charles, for me, I definitely prefer when Will Smallbone and Flynn Downs are in midfield. But yeah, it'd be nice to have a striker, I think, but somebody that's in the box, sort of just there, instead of someone that's also the creator as well as the finisher of goals. But I think
someone
it's just
other than Sekou Mara.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm still not really convinced by him. Really, I want to be.
Glenn's not either. No.
Yeah, it's sort of hard. Yeah, sort of hard work really sometimes with him. But yeah.
We're going to moan about all the games that are coming up though, Glenn, but do we look at this replay as another chance for those players and the squad players just to build a bit of sharpness for coming? I'm trying to think of the positives of having an extra game against Watford midweek. Is it another chance for them to go, actually, do you know what? That first half was terrible. We saw what they needed to do, and if he does make 9 changes, then they're going to be adamant and desperate to make sure he doesn't have to rely on the subs again like he did today.
When is the replay? Do we know?
I think it's week commencing the 5th, February the 5th.
correct.
So yeah.
So it's going to be in the middle of what was already a packed month.
Yeah.
So it's so there's no way we play Watford at home with anything other than the fringe players all playing again. It's going to be roughly the same lineup as today, and we have the dubious prize of going to Anfield if we win. We'll probably do about as well as we did when we tried to win the podcast awards. Left out in the car park and winning nothing, but
Leaving at half time.
Leaving at half time. But so yeah, I mean, the positives that come out of it is the likes of Jaden Magoma, Tyler Diblin, Sam Amo will get another game. You know, they'll all get at least 45 minutes in that game, and you know, it gives the opportunity for the likes of Joe Rothwell, Charlie Alcaraz on the fringe of the team to come back in. Maybe it's a game. I don't know if Joe Aribo's back by then. I don't know when the AFCON finishes. Probably not. Probably not. But you know, it might be a game for him to get back up to speed. So yeah. I mean, it'll be another game for Joe Lumley as well. So that is the positive about it. And there's definitely no way that we'll go full strength for it, because if we weren't going to go full strength today when we didn't have a game last midweek or next midweek, we're certainly not going to do it in the middle of a fixture pile up in February. So yeah, and it'll be at home, so that'll be more helpful to the youngsters, I guess. There'll be more goodwill towards them, and I hope the club get the pricing right, because it'll be in the middle of obviously quite a few games coming up. So yeah, it's another game of football. So I'm happy with it. Just another midweek of St Mary's, fine.
Yeah, you're right. If the price is right, then it's not necessarily a bad thing. Steve, you called it in the week that the referee was going to be terrible, and he at least lived up to your expectations. There was one thing that didn't disappoint today.
I mean, it's not really a difficult prediction these days, is it? Guessing that a referee's going to have a shocker, but yeah, we've had Michael Salisbury a few times, and I don't think he's ever been anything other than completely erratic. Some proper weird decisions today. I mean, I think he's a little bit unlucky actually in terms of the Holgate decision for the free kick, because from my angle you could actually see that Holgate did get a toe end on the ball, but the way the guy's thrown himself over, and the way Holgate goes in for the challenge, you could understand why he thinks it's a foul. But then there was a counter attack that we started, where Shay Adams basically gets booted in the air from behind after he's kind of flicked the ball around the corner. And because there's this new guidance that's been in the laws for a year or two now, that it's now the bookable offence is now sort of stopping a promising attack. Well, because he managed to flick it round and we carried on the attack, because that attack wasn't stopped, the booking for hoofing someone up in the air is suddenly null and void. I mean, that's just garbage, isn't it? Absolute nonsense. And there were two or three weird decisions kind of later in the first half as well. I mean, there wasn't an awful lot to give in the second, other than I mean, it was interesting to see the roles reversed, where Watford were the ones indulging in some absolutely ridiculous dark arts, time wasting, and all that sort of nonsense, given what they
what we did when we were there in the league game.
Exactly. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, we all found that a little bit weird, didn't we? And I mean, for Watford to be doing it, I mean, when they're 1-0 up, I guess you kind of expect it, but it was. You just want referees just to get a grip on it. It's not difficult, but hey ho, here we are.
Would it be the same ref for the replay? Is that how it works? I can't remember.
That's a good question. I think it might be.
Probably will, wouldn't it? Yeah. He has
Great.
to come down.
Lucky us.
And just on that draw, Eleanor, I know we shouldn't be getting ahead of ourselves, but it was odd that the draw kind of worked out where I think it was like halfway through the second half, we suddenly knew that it would be a trip to Anfield, and everyone was like, "Oh, do you know what? Just sack it off, turn it in, don't worry about it." But you think that the magic of the FA Cup for someone like yourself, and it's still there, and you're still really excited about that and the potential trip to Anfield?
Oh yeah, I know we won't beat Liverpool, but like I hope we will somehow. We never seem to like get much luck against them, and obviously like there's all this stuff with Klopp at the moment, so I'm sure like they'll end up winning the FA Cup anyway. But yeah, I'd love to think like somehow we can manage to win there if we win the replay, but I don't hold out much hope, to be honest. Yeah.
It just seems a bit of a shame that it might be Liverpool that end that unbeaten run. I'm going to ask you
Yeah.
all for Player of the Week. So have a little think. I mean, Steve, you probably do you want to go first because you were there? I'm just going to go with Stu Armstrong.
Yeah, slim pickings. I mean,
Anybody from
yeah,
the 4 that came on or the 5 that
yeah,
came on?
Stu would have been my pick. God, yeah. I mean, there's really not many options. Fraser was good. Properly motoring down that left wing. I mean, there was one run he made literally within a minute of coming on where he must have sprinted 70 yards, and you could see that he was absolutely knackered at the end of it. It's like, let's keep that energy up, shall we? But yeah, Stu Armstrong, and yeah, I'll go with Fraser as my pick, I suppose.
This could just be a 2-horse race this week. Glenn, any names you want to chuck in?
The only one, yeah, one of the. I thought Jaden Magoma had a good game. I'd chuck him in there, and Sam Ammo when he came on, I think it's worth a mention. I know he came on at what was a perfect, with a perfect brief for him, which is don't worry about defending, just try and make something happen, and if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. And I thought he was excellent when he came on. So yeah, I'd say I'd big up the 2 youngsters, but. Yeah, I mean, really, it's Stuart Armstrong or Fraser are the 2 that stand out for this week, I think.
Anybody you want to add to the list, Eleanor? The bit that you caught. Anybody you want to chuck in, or is it going to be Stu Armstrong?
I think it probably should be Stuart, really. I don't say Jack Stevens, but like not really as like the best player, just because he was like showed good leadership in the second half and made like some good interceptions. But surely it's just Stuart, really.
And I must just say, you missed some of the game. Where were you today, and what were you doing? Because it sounded a bit more exciting than me sat at home listening to it on the radio.
Oh, I did the St Mary's tour, so that was it. Yeah, stupidly instead of going to the game, but yeah.
But how was it? Is it worth doing? I did it a very long time ago, and you can see the prison cell where some guy from Sunderland
Yeah.
kicked the door in. That's how long ago it was. I don't know if they've replaced the door or not. Was it
Yeah, I think
worthwhile?
they
Was
have,
it
yeah.
good?
Yeah, it was good. Like I got it as a birthday present, so I was just like mainly going around the hospitality suites that are very expensive. But yeah, it was nice. Nice to see some actual like trophies. Obviously, mainly FA Cup that we won as well. So yeah, it was nice place. Yeah.
It is a bit of a myth that there's nothing in the trophy cabinet. There's a couple
Yeah.
of little bits in there. Lots of pennants, if I remember rightly. So,
Yeah.
right. Back in October, we drew 1-1 at home against Rotherham, and it's fair to say that was a frustrating afternoon all round. This weekend, it's the return fixture. Glenn, if you cast your mind back, that game, I think, was 3 into the unbeaten run at the time. Although obviously we didn't know that. With the benefit of hindsight, you look back and go, okay. At the time, there was quite a bit of anger after that game, wasn't there? That was a really frustrating afternoon.
Yeah, I think people weren't fully bought into the Russell Martin sort of like way of football. There was quite a lot of dissent in the stands, and it was one of those games where, from what I remember, we played brilliantly for the first 20 minutes and pulled them all over the place and scored. And then we had 20 minutes of walking football where we just didn't do anything and just passed the ball around. And we had 99% possession probably, but just passed the ball around. And then we made a mistake at the back where I think Harwood Bellis didn't get enough distance on a header, and Bazunu, for reasons unknown, was 20 yards out, and they had Jordan Hugo had one shot.
It was that lob, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it lobbed, and it was literally the only time that Rotherham really got into a half. It was ridiculous, and it's a game that I think has haunted Russell Martin ever since. Because he's still bringing it up like 2 months later. He was, and because I think it was everything against his whole ethos, which is he wants us to dominate possession, so we win games deservedly. That's his whole thing, and I think that really offended him that Rotherham managed to nick a point having had one shot, However, at the time, as I say, not everyone had sort of like bought into Russell's way of doing things, and so there was a lot of frustration that we had basically passed the ball around without going anywhere, then letting a goal, and then we went into panic mode when it went 1-1. And when you're trying to force it too much, it never really happens. So it was a frustrating day, and it was at a time when we were dropping quite a few points at home. We hadn't. I mean, since then, have we won every home game since then?
Yep.
Yeah, we must have.
I think we have. Yeah. So, but again, it's like the 4-game losing run. It serves a purpose in that it teaches you things, and since then, you know, that's one of the things that I've been impressed with Russell Martin, is that he's shown an ability to learn from the bad times. And it's not just the 4 games. I think that Rotherham game where we basically chucked 2 points in the bin taught him a lot, and now we are much more likely to keep the foot on the throat and go for the second goal, especially at home. And the Swansea game last week was the first time we'd kind of done it away from home, and that's why that, you know, this game coming up, even though Rotherham have had some success against some of the better teams in the division, I assume by, you know, parking the bus and then offering a sporadic threat like they did at St Mary's, I'm sort of like quite confident that we'll have the tools to deal with that this time. And if we get the first goal, which we tend to do, we will, you know, try and push home that advantage and not just sit back on it and go passive. So quite looking forward to this one. At the end of the day, even though they've had good results against some of the good teams, they are flat last in the league. So we obviously should have too much for them, and that's what we should be focusing on, and not the fact that they got a good result against, was it Leeds? They got a decent result against.
Yeah, I think they drew with Ipswich as well.
Yeah.
Eleanor, you were at the Swansea game, I think, weren't you? So another away game. We talked on the podcast a couple of weeks ago about needing to turn it on and score more than 1 goal away from home. You must have, first of all, been delighted with what you saw at Swansea, but if we can kind of replicate that and get a good start, then we're going to make up for that drawback in October.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because I remember like that game, we just didn't put away our chances. But I know like since then we've definitely improved with that. Like we've been much more clinical, and definitely the Swansea game as well. Because when we did concede, which was just a bit of a mess, I think, was it Flynn Downs scored like moments after that. So it was good to like have like a quick response, and just like some of the best football we've played, because it was just so like fluid and everyone knew where they were on the pitch, and everyone just seemed like so confident in like the way we were playing. So I think the game against Middlesbrough Rotherham I remember, because they drew 1-1. I think they were quite like resilient. So I think basically we just have to put away our chances, really, like, because I think Middlesbrough had a lot of chances, and then just Rotherham were just good at like sort of keeping them out. So I think as long as we don't do what we did last time, because I was also listening to Russell Martin's interview on, I think it was Monday Night Club or something last week on 5 Live, and like I remember him saying like he was so frustrated with all the points we've dropped, and that we just needed to obviously like convert more draws into wins. And I think definitely like we can't really afford to, especially being 1 point off Ipswich, can't really afford to like draw against the side that are bottom of the table. So
I think Glen touched on it though, Steve. I mean, they've put some decent draws against teams that you necessarily wouldn't expect them to. You'd expect Leeds and Ipswich to get a win there, and us to a certain extent. But for them, I don't think draws are enough, are they? They're in a bit more trouble now than they were back in October, and they've changed the manager too.
Yeah, I mean they're a little bit adrift now. I think 10 points off QPR now. So there's a sizable gap, and you struggle to see where a side with the resources that Rotherham have got, or don't have, more appropriately, to be able to close that gap. I mean, I think you can easily imagine that any one of QPR, Stoke, maybe. I can't even think who else is kind of just hovering. Huddersfield, probably one of those. You can kind of see any of those teams kind of going on a run of not picking up like no wins in 10 or whatever. But you can't see Rotherham on the flip side winning the 3 or 4 games in a month that are that's going to close the gap to anything meaningful. So yeah, I think they're in kind of almost in damage limitation mode at the moment, you think, but they're quite happy to bloody some noses. And as you say, they've drawn at home with Leeds, drawn at home with Ipswich. Leicester needs a 93rd minute winner there. They've beaten Middlesbrough at home. They've drawn away with Middlesbrough and obviously drawn away at St Mary's. So against the better sides, they basically collected most of their points. So it's not going to be a walk in the park, or at least in theory, it's not going to be a walk in the park. But if we go there and we start the game in the way that we started against Swansea, albeit Rotherham clearly aren't going to play as open as Swansea did, then we should be able to blow them away. But it's easy sitting here saying it 6 days before. The proof of the pudding is going up there, and I mean, Yorkshire weather, likely to be cold, could be raining, could be windy. All of a sudden, the conditions kind of make the game a little bit of a leveler, and you never quite know how it's going to pan out. But you'd like to think now that we're now in that zone of just knowing how to get it done, and that's going to be the big thing, I think.
I did say it would be frustrating if the unbeaten run came to an end at Liverpool, but it would be even worse in hindsight if it was against Rotherham away. I mean, that would really like stick in your throat. Glen, was this the one which led to that top secret fans forum afterwards, where they had all the PowerPoints out to explain the style of play, and there was that kind of call for patience? I seem to think it was. Did they say it wasn't as a result of that game? They planned to do it anyway, but it was around that sort of time, wasn't it, where there was that bit of a wobble and people weren't convinced about that.
Was it after Middlesbrough, maybe?
I can't remember if it was. No, the Rotherham game had happened because that was mentioned quite a lot in the presentation itself. So we'd already had the win against Leeds and the win away at Stoke with Stuart Armstrong's free kick, and then we played Rotherham and drawn that game, and there may have been another one after that.
Is it Preston? There was
maybe
when Bazunu scored, or
Bazunu's header nearly. Yeah. But yeah, I mean that the Rotherham game did make up quite a lot of Russell Martin's speech. I don't know if he intended it to, but it was obviously something that was playing on his mind. So he kind of started off explaining how we always try and find the spare man and stuff like that. All fairly sort of obvious stuff. And then he went off about how Rotherham had one shot and that was it. And it was obviously clearly bothering him. So and it actually served a decent purpose to explain how that won't happen. More often than not, that will not happen. And if we play the way we play and we do it well, then we won't lose drop points in games like that. So and since then it's been proved to be right. Yeah, we've had a couple of draws where we've come away thinking that we should have won the game, but not really for the same reasons. Usually it's been individual mistakes that have cost us a goal. That have, like Watford away in the league was we were going to see that one out 1-0, and then the sort of double mistake at the end cost us. So yeah, we haven't repeated the Rotherham mistake, and hopefully we won't do it this weekend. But I think it's definitely something that Russell used as an illustration point to at that fans forum meeting.
Do you think, Eleanor, any of the cup starters are in with a shout of playing? We're heading into that busy time of the year now. Do you think it would be ended up with the same team that started the Swansea game? There's nothing that's really stood out today, was there, that makes anybody a nailed-on start for the weekend?
No, I know I probably should not play like as strong a team, I guess, theoretically, because obviously they're bottom of the league. But I think definitely the team that started against Swansea should play, because I still get so worried when you play a team like that sort of need points. Because obviously I remember last season for us, we seemed to be better at getting points off Man United, and can't remember now Arsenal, obviously, that game, but then sort of getting points around us. So I think probably just playing the strongest team, because I mean, Charlie's kind of like not as kind of like doesn't take his chances sometimes. So I think just sticking with like the midfield that we stuck with, and then obviously Fraser and Adam Armstrong and Shay Adams, like I think it all just is fine really. Doesn't sort of need changing. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you all for some score predictions, as we always finish the little preview pieces with. Steve, just same question for you, I guess, first as well. Nobody really stood out from the cup at the weekend. There's no one going to be knocking on his door on Monday saying, I need to start.
I mean, if they do, they're very optimistic. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought so. And I think actually that's probably part of the reason for the kind of disjointed performance. I think there is a recognition that now there is basically more or less a set in stone starting 11 when everyone's fit and available.
Yeah.
Which is good in that we've got a settled team and that everyone knows their jobs and it's working really well and we're getting loads of really good results. But you do obviously have the flip side that then the players that aren't in that team know that they're not getting in the team. Yeah. And I think there's probably a psychological sort of slight reduction in motivation and performance levels when they do get a chance in a game like this, where I mean, if you're making 9 changes, you're sending out a fairly strong signal that actually you're not really that bothered about this game, lads. So yeah, I think realistically the 11, yeah, as I say, barring fitness and suspension, or someone coming in at some game in the not too distant future and doing something out of the ordinary, yeah, we could basically name our 11 for next Saturday right now. I think, yeah, I think we're in that situation now where you're going to try and play that same 11 all the time. It's going to get difficult next month when we've got a load of midweek games, and obviously we've tended to make 4 or 5 changes for those games with limited kind of performance benefit from it. So yeah, we have to see what happens in those games, but I would imagine this one it will be full strength. If the game is done early doors, if we do manage to put it to bed quickly, then you can look at interchanging some of these players with a view to maybe naming a slightly stronger side in the Watford replay.
Yep.
That's kind of the carrot on offer for Russell Martin, is that you can actually do some rotation in these league games as well as the cup games, and it's relatively low risk. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, the one thing I'm slightly concerned about is that they've basically got the highest rated keeper in the league, Victor Johansson. Like if you look at like who scored ratings, they tend to give like a rating out of 10 based on sort of Opta stats and stuff. He's by far the best goalkeeper in the league. I mean, obviously it's because he's the busiest. But if you've got a goalkeeper of that standard, and we saw it at St Mary's, he was brilliant.
Yeah.
And if you've got a keeper that's that good, you can kind of almost doesn't matter what useless non-entities you've got in front of him. If he's saving everything, then all of a sudden everyone just gets frustrated and you start panicking, which is what we did in the home game. So that's my, to be honest, that's my only concern, I think.
I can feel he hit it too well coming on, Glenn, and that worries me a little bit with these good saves. Well, listen out for that in the commentary. Right, let's do score predictions. Eleanor, would you like to go first? Score prediction, please, for the Rotherham game.
I don't know. I'll say 2-0 because I'd probably be more optimistic, but I don't know why I feel a bit nervous for some stupid reason. So I'll just go for 2-0. Yeah.
Glenn.
3-0 win.
3-0 win.
Yeah,
and
no dramas. Get the job done.
Going 4? We got 2, 3, maybe 4.
Well, I actually got it right this week. I actually got one against Watford, so I might even be off the bottom.
I'm last now.
What is it they say about a monkey in a typewriter? Or no, the stop clock, isn't it? Even the stop clock
tells the right time twice a day. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't get it right 2 weeks in a row, surely. But yeah, why not? Let's go for something silly. 4-1.
4-1. Right. Okay. Nice one. If you're watching live, by the way, don't forget to put all your predictions into the comments as well. Couple of other bits. Just want to touch on the January transfer window, which I think is it's Thursday night at 11 o'clock. the transfer window closes. Bit of news this week, Glen. One which was a bit disappointing, I think, was Kamari Doyle, who's transferred to Brighton, an academy product, 18 years old. I think it was 2 senior appearances that he made. Obviously a regular for the under 21s, but not able to get enough first team football here, so goes to Brighton. And
Yeah,
you kind of read that and you're like, that's just a load of nonsense, right? But we wish him well.
Well, as I frequently say, when players leave, they're dead to me, basically. So I don't really care how he does, to be honest. Yeah, it's game time assurances. I read. I mean, no club, and certainly Brighton, are not going to be saying, "Oh, well, we'll guarantee you 20 games before the end of the season." It's just utter rubbish. So I don't know when he thought he was going to play exactly, because he's been injured since September. So he's basically only had probably about 3 weeks of Russell Martin's time here. So is he talking about playing under Ruben Sellers in that car crash at the tail end of last season? I don't know. Basically, his reasoning doesn't really matter. He wants to go. He's made up his mind. He wants to go. See you later. We've got apparently a decent fee out of it. When I've seen him play, I saw him because he played at Brighton last season, and I assume it was the Rotherham game he played, not Rotherham, Gillingham game
the cup
he
game.
played at the start of this season. And I've seen him play one age group game. And to be honest, he looked a million miles away from being ready for sort of first team football. He looked very lightweight. So whether there's advisors in his ear, or whether he's been tapped up, whatever, it doesn't really matter. He's gone. It sounds very similar to the Jimmy J Morgan one. In that, I mean, what did Jimmy J Morgan say? He thought he'd get more first team football at Chelsea, which is just hilarious. I mean, it's slightly less hilarious than that one, but it's. I mean, I'd say he decided a while ago that he wanted to go. It's disappointing when I don't know how long he's been at the club. I think it's quite a long time. It's disappointing when people want to go. But there you go. We just got to shrug our shoulders and get on with it. Would it have made any difference if we were still in the Premier League? It might have done, but then the way things are going, we could well be back in the Premier League in 3 or 4 months. So I'm not really having that as an excuse either. You just you wait and see what happens if that's what you want to do. But bottom line is, he wants to go. See you later. All the best. And I'd rather focus on Tyler Dibbling, Sam Ammo, and Jaden Magoma, who clearly at this moment in time want to be here.
Steve, another couple of names that have been linked this week. The guy from Coventry, is it Kalamo Hare, the winger? You're not convinced about that one, though, are you?
It just feels like there's a bit of 2 and 2 = 5 going on, because I think he's out of contract in the summer, and obviously we're in the hunt for going up, and you would think that he's probably got his eye on a Premier League move. So taking a sideways step for, well, maybe half a step up in terms of going from 6th to 3rd, is potentially a good career move for him. But it just doesn't feel right. I mean, the talk is 15 million quid. The guy's got 6 months left on his contract. Do we have 15 million quid to spend within the current financial fair play restrictions? Yeah. Given everything that's been said over the last 6 to 8 months in terms of how the sales in the summer were basically rectifying the god-awful mistakes of the year before, but also that we needed to make those sales in order to free up some money to then bring in the players that we need, and yet we're kind of on the edge of that boundary, I think. So dropping 15 million quid in January doesn't seem like remotely what we're likely to do for a guy who, he looks very good in that Coventry team, but it's a Coventry team that is set up basically around the way that he plays, and I don't think for all the world that we're going to change the way that we play to accommodate him. And he's also unproven at the level above. I mean, I know that's kind of our our USP in the past has always been, well, we'll give you the opportunity that a lot of other clubs won't. But I mean, certainly in terms of this week, I'd be absolutely amazed if we dropped that sort of money on anybody.
Yeah. Alfie, who is heading back from Watford as we speak, asked Russell Martin what supporters can expect ahead of the deadline next week, and he says, this is the quote, he said, "I hope that we add one more player to the squad and that we don't lose any of ours. We're going to have to wait and see. It's the hope that kills you." Eleanor, just final word on the transfer window. It closes, as I said, I think 11 o'clock on Thursday. What would you like to see? Is there somebody you like to see come in, or is it more about who we can keep hold of?
I don't know if it's just because it's January, but I have zero ideas for specific players that I'd want. But I think, like I said, just someone that's like a goal scorer but hangs around in the box really. But I know we've got links with, I can't remember his name, the Burnley winger.
Oh, Benson.
Yeah, and I feel really like silly. I don't really know anything about him, despite actually watching a few Burnley games. So yeah, if he's good, then it'd be good.
He doesn't play, that's why.
Oh, there you go. So that's not good.
Do you think for us though, it's more about who we can keep hold of, and if we can get to 11 o'clock and Carl Walker-Peters is still here, then that's a win.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, I would have preferred Teller to have stayed really than to have gone for this guy, but it is what it is. I mean, I don't really want Walker-Peters to leave or anyone like that to leave. That would just be awful, and then I don't know what we do with that position anyway. So yeah, I hope more than anything that we don't have any problems really. I mean, I think I'm not massively bothered about Shea Adams because it's just so I get so fed up with Shea Adams, like with how inconsistent he is. And then obviously when the transfer window's open, he seems to be more consistent. But yeah, apart from that, I don't really want anyone to leave really. So
a nice quiet evening is, I think, is what we're all kind of hoping for. That's what we're saying. Steve, the women's team today had a win at Sheffield United. They're still in with a shout, but it's going to kind of go down to the wire with that promotion push.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous top of the table, really. I think there's 5 points between first and fifth. And the teams in fourth and fifth have both got a game in hand on 3 above. So, yeah, you can kind of throw a bit of a net over all 5 of them, and there's very little between them. It's going to be down to who's a bit more consistent in the running. And actually, it's probably more a case of who doesn't slip up against the bottom half teams, because that's often been our problem. Like, I mean, this season we've already lost at London City Lionesses, who are third bottom. We lost to Durham in the last minute up there as well, who are bottom half. So those are the slip ups that will end up costing us, if anything. But I think the next 3 are against teams around us. So I think if you come out of those 3 with 5 or more points, then I think you give yourself a bit of a platform. But I think Palace are the ones to look out, because they're the ones that can just score a lot of goals. We seem to have gone back into our shell of only being able to score 1 or 2 a game, which ultimately against the better sides might not be enough. But we'll see. It's going to be interesting.
Eleanor, for those that follow you on social media, they might have been a little bit surprised to see that you wrote a piece about Mel Blythe, and I just wanted to touch on that as well while we've got you on. Obviously, part of the FA Cup winning team, passed away, I think, earlier this month. What inspired that for you? Because that was a really interesting piece about somebody who is not often the first name when you talk about that team from '76 that comes to mind.
I think I just didn't really know much about him, to be honest. So I just wanted to actually find out what he was like as a player, really. And yeah, I mean, I sort of like old-fashioned, really tough defenders. So, and I didn't realise that we went on, I think it was 16 or something, unbeaten run.
Yeah, it was a 16-game unbeaten run. So yeah.
I didn't realise that either, so I thought, oh, perfect, I need to sort of figure this out, what happened. And there seemed to be a lot of changes at centre-back partnership that season, and a lot of rotation really. So it was just interesting really finding out about him, and sort of what he was like at Palace as well, and the fact that he was just so loyal to all his clubs, and also the fact that FA Cup team basically just completely believed they could win the FA Cup from the beginning of the run really, and they all had so much confidence, which be nice if that happened in the future really, because I'd love us to win another major trophy and sort of prove ourselves a bit more. And it was just good that they seemed to just really believe in themselves really, especially against Man United, because we were also in the second division back then. So yeah, it was just really interesting finding out about it. Yeah.
It's a great read, and there's some great pictures in there of the squad off duty in '76. You got like Nick Holmes in the worst tank top that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So some of the fashion and stuff. So a really nice trip down memory lane and worth looking out. There is the other thing I wanted to talk about. Earlier this month, they announced the plans to introduce some safe standing at St Mary's. They said they want to improve the match day experience and create a red and white wall. There's been a lot on social media about this, as you can imagine. I think there was a meeting of a supporters group this week as well. Heard a few little bits about that. Obviously, the proposal would involve moving away fans to a different part of the ground. Everybody's going to have a slightly different opinion on how that's going to work. Certainly listening to the people from the club over the years saying that wasn't possible because of the buses and things. It was a bit out of the blue, I think, when they announced it. What were your initial thoughts on that, Glenn? Do you think it's a good thing? Is the intention right, or does it need to be thought out a bit more?
Well, it obviously needs to be thought out fully, and that's why they're consulting, various people. From a logistics point of view, it'll be very, very interesting. I had a thought not long after it got announced that, they were talking about creating the atmosphere of a full end of, of red and white of Saints fans. But to me, moving the away fans up to the family end means you just sort of split the chapel end. So you're just moving the problem to the other end, sort of thing. So, and I remember when we were at the Dell and they did all the changes for the Taylor report and all that sort of stuff, the Archers Road end became home fans only, and the away fans got moved to the side, in the west stand, I think. It's sort of like in the west stand.
East.
Oh, the east was it? But they got moved to the side, so they couldn't be as big an influence on the when they were attacking down that end, sort of thing. So I don't know if it's logistically possible, but I would like the away fans to be stuck in either the Kingsland or the Itchen. I'm not sure the Itchen's possible because of the because of the hospitality bit, and obviously the dugouts and whatnot over that end. Having away fans behind the dugouts is never a good thing. I remember one particular incident with involving Graham Ricks when they were rebuilding their ground, and I was at Chelsea in the away end directly behind the dugout. That was entertaining too. You can't have that. But I'll be interested to see how it works out. I think Alfie's raised concerns about being sort of like worried about people being forced, if you like, from cheaper areas of the ground and having to pay more money through no fault of their own. Broadly, I think it's a good thing, and we'll see how it works out. I'm sure all the hopefully the right decisions will be made, and the people who want to sort of like stand up in the safe standing bit can all be accommodated. But I think there's a lot of water to go under the bridge before it becomes a reality. Because to be honest, moving the away fans up to where the family stand is now, I kind of thought, I can see a few issues with that.
What were your thoughts on that, Steve? Do you think it's going to happen? Obviously, safe standing is something that the club has spoken about before, and I think you can't charge any more money. You can't fit any more seats in. You just end up with a lot of work that you have to do on the ground and no extra additional capacity because it's still one stander per seat. So there's not a lot. It's just the atmosphere, which is the main benefit, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately with the rail seats, the rails that they would install in amongst the existing rows of seats. Essentially, what you're doing is creating an actually licensed standing area. I mean, obviously, we know that Northam has stood since the ground was opened. There have been various failed attempts by stewards to try and get Northam to sit down over the years, which have never worked. And in the end, the local council just basically turned a blind eye to it. which I think was always the likely outcome. But doing it this way, where you've got a dedicated bit where also everybody who's buying tickets in that area knows that it's standing and knows what experience they're going to have in that environment. So I think it's good from that perspective in terms of making sure everyone is sort of fully aware and fully eyes wide open when they buy a ticket for the Northern stand. You're going to be standing. Or if you want to sit, you ain't going to be able to see. And nobody's gonna come to your rescue and have stewards saying to the people in front of you, sit down, because that's not what that section is going to be about now. Doing the whole stand and kind of moving the away fans. The problem with that, from a logistical perspective, is that there are a lot of people that go to the game and have chosen their season ticket seat specifically so they are next to the away fans, whether that's in the Northern or whether that's in the Itchin. And all that's going to happen with those people is that they are going to up sticks and move to wherever the new away section is moved to. I mean, I think logistically the most sensible place is probably where the family section is now, in the Kingsland Chapel corner, because you've then got the exit way through the
to get the coaches out,
yeah, and all that sort of stuff. I think that makes a fair bit of sense.
So do you think they're just going to end up with the same problem, but you just turn the ground around? So
kind of, but you'll theoretically have, where you've got the safe standing at the northern end, there will be people who will be attracted to that and will say, okay, right, well, we will make this end a quote unquote home end. And that will be kind of where hopefully people want to generate some atmosphere from. But you're also going to have the same thing either side of the away end. So, I mean, maybe that's a benefit. Maybe that's actually going to persuade more people that they to be in an area where you're generating an atmosphere rather than just consuming it. So maybe it works from that perspective. I mean, I'm amazed that the police have even kind of considered this, given, as you said earlier, that over the years there's been, like, the club has been asked about this so many times about, why do the away fans get a prime part of the ground to, and I mean the limbs whenever we could see the last minute equaliser or winner at the northern end in the second half. Just like we've had that since the ground opened in 2001, and the club has been asked about why do we keep giving the away fans that area, and their fob off answer has always been, well, the police won't let us put the away end anywhere else. So for this to come now, kind of either the police have changed their minds, which seems unlikely to me, or basically everybody who has been in charge of such decisions in the past has been lying. So yeah, I mean, interesting one to ponder, that one, I think.
I do worry what people are going to talk about at the fans forums if they do it, because that's obviously one of the questions which always comes up. Eleanor, I just can't help but think open the train station and James Ward-Prowse's testimonial. Eleanor, I can't help but think that I'm a bit too old now. When we're going to the Reading away game just before the start of the season, the friendly, and then being really annoyed that I had to stand up for the whole game. But is that something that appeals to you, like the safe standing? Can you see the benefit in that and the improvements in the atmosphere?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing for me is, I think definitely this season it has been better, but I think we do need like a really proper home atmosphere, because it is like a thing, like I don't really like sort of like having quite like a quiet home atmosphere. I mean, it's definitely been better this season. Obviously, like when the football's been awful, like last season, especially like the Forest game, Nathan Jones period, Ruben's set, is like, obviously people aren't going to be like being really loud, but I mean, I'd like safe standing really, but yeah, it's just, I don't know. The main thing is just improving the atmosphere, which I think like we've definitely started to do, and for people to be like a bit more vocal sometimes, because I always end up sitting around lots of families that just kind of sit there for the whole game, so it's not really like a big atmosphere, but yeah.
Just goals, isn't it? Early goals and winning games.
Yeah.
That's all we need, really. Save a fortune. I think it's a debate which will run and run, but but in a good way. And I look forward to seeing what the outcome will be. That's pretty much it for this week's episode. So thank you for watching and thank you for listening. Thanks again to Pitter Self-Drive for sponsoring the episode as well. Don't forget they offer cars, vans, trucks and minibus hire for flexible short-term or long-term rentals with 24-hour drop-off service. And they're offering TSP listeners 10% off their rentals with the code TOTALSAINTS. That's all one word. You can use that code when you're booking online or quote the code when you're booking over the phone. And to find out more or to get in touch, just head to pitterselfdrive.co.uk or give them a call on 02380 474 443. Don't forget you can follow Total Saints Podcast on all the social media platforms. Just have a search for @TotalSaintsPod. We do enjoy hearing from you throughout the week. You can also drop us an email if you like via the website if there's something you need to share or just maybe get something off of your chest. You'll also find us on Patreon. That's where I mentioned at the start you can support the podcast with those monthly contributions. It's patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast. And there are 4 tiers on there ranging from £5 to £20 per month. Each of the tiers comes with different perks. There's weekly shout outs for the patrons in our Francis Benali and our Mick Shannon tiers. So thank you to Dave Melton, Mark Atkins, Andy Hollis, Anthony Thompson, Saints in Exile, Gavin Ford, James Harron, Nicky Nicholson, Southampton NY, Drew Dyer, James Kibbe and Mike E, who are in the Francis Benali tier. And also a big thank you to Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Higston, Phil Cook, Nick Reed, Paul Stewart, Phil Horstrup, Matt Hall, and Mark Littlewood, who are in our Mick Shannon tier. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Glenn. Eleanor, thank you for coming on. Where can we find you on Twitter if we want to give you a follow or read some of the pieces that you've written?
My at's awful, so I mean it's here on the live stream. I never changed it, and it's just an awful long bit of numbers.
It's like your first email address.
Yeah.
Surely people think you're a bot.
I know. I just never changed it, and then I get tagged in things. I think, well, I can't change it now. So yeah.
Well, we'll give you a follow anyway. Thank you for coming on. Thanks for joining us this week. Thanks again for watching. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again next